Excellent. Goody, goody. So that looks like we have gone live. That's always positive. Let me just find myself on here. Excellent. So that looks like we have to get rid of the sound there because we know that that's working. There we are. Get that in there. And then let's just see what happens. Because we're just a little bit earlier than 6 o'clock, which is absolutely fine. In a minute, just so I don't go flying over anything, because that would not go down very well. For those of you, thank you for those of you who are joining us. My name is Gill. I am part of Pentacolor's creative team and have been for nearly 5 years, I think. Anyway, so today we are going to make something Christmas themed because it's that time of the year. And we'll just see what happens from there. We'll just wait for a few people to arrive in. And let me just do a little bit of moving of stuff around. We've done some prep. We know where we're going. Well, we think we know where we're going. Of course we know where we're going. Let's just have that could do with a little bit of a trim. So as we wait for a few more people to arrive, and just let me know that we've come in. For those of you that are ready, the heavens in the UK have decided to open, so it's now chucking it down very unhelpfully. So the noise that you can hear is the sound of rain hitting my conservatory roof, because that's just what we needed, really, wasn't it? But hey ho, that's just fine. You know, there's not much we can do about Mother Nature. At all. There we are. Let's just trim that one. I think that one could do with a little haircut as well. So I've got resin pieces here and an ordinary pair of scissors, and as you can see that even though these are cast resin and it's said you can, if you've got overspill, you can either sand off or cut off excess reasonably easily just with a pair of scissors. So that's always cool. Hello Shelley, welcome my darling. Good evening Sarah, welcome. So there we are. Let me just move this away. Let's just chuck that out of harm's way. So I don't know about the rest of the world, but in the UK there is definitely now a trend for charcuterie boards for dinners, and themed ones with people. So lots of the shops have got interesting shaped boards designed to hold charcuterie products in, and that makes life easy for choosing a nice substantial base for a make. But they're wooden and they have been treated to make them food safe, and also that means that they're likely to have a layer of oil or polish on them, which makes it difficult for paint to adhere to. Not impossible. So when I'm using these, I always give them a little spritz with some rubbing alcohol and lift off that surface layer. So Pentart sell the rubbing alcohol in sprays, which is cool. And we're going to do a couple of things tonight around this. Let me just pick up, because I've got about 55,000 pots of paint in front of me, as you can imagine, because why wouldn't I have lots of paint in front of me? There we are. So that is the paint I want to start with, and I've got a crackle product out that again I don't very often use, but that's cool because that was the whole purpose. So this is just some matte acrylic paint. No, I'm not priming this. Controversial, I know. But I think by the time I've got all of the layers on that I want, it's not going to be a problem. So let me just pop this into here. We've got a little bit of painting to do. I will be using a primer, of course, somewhere else, but there we are. I might need to move this around. Good evening, Julie. Welcome. Welcome, welcome. So let's just pop that round. Have that nicely covered. So it's Christmas. I've picked a Christmas tree shaped charcuterie board. I believe for those of you that are in the UK, mine came from the range. But I've certainly seen boards in B&M, Home Bargains, pretty much everywhere. So we're going to start out with some different colours. We're not going to have it all the same, but the top two are going to be the same. Good evening, Elizabeth. Good evening, Sarah. Thank you so much for... We will need that later on for something else, but there we are. For joining us this evening and for sharing the video, which is always really helpful. So I've just got a nice brush here that's going to allow me to pop these on and cover around here. This is, say, designed for charcuterie. So it's got a little bit of an edge, but that's fine. We're going to take full advantage of the layers. Why not? Why not, she says. We're going to need a bit more of that blue paint because we want to fill the whole of this piece. Hi, Sheila. There we are. It's good to be able to use things up, which is lovely. So there we are. Let's just give this a nice coat. As I say, I'm adding lots of layers to this. The Pentacolor paint is covering this wood in one layer really easily, giving me a good depth of coverage. And I've deliberately not primed it because I didn't feel I needed to, having cleaned the surface oils from the wood off with the rubbing alcohol, and because of the numbers of layers that I'm intending popping on this along the way. Yeah, so 2 areas for sky, because that's where my brain is going. Yeah, no, why not? Let's just pop that in there. Let's just grab a brush. I saw your review, your comments on it. I mean, why do you want to eat green pastry? Sounds most unappetizing to me. And there we are. And then we're going to have some. This is actually country green for the bottom of here, and we're going to give it a little bit of a blast. I'll put quite a lot on there because we're going to need a bit more of that. There we are. I quite like the size of that brush, so let's just get rid of the blue off there. Yes, very, very strange. I do like green spinach though, but that's got green pasta, but that has spinach in it to make it green. So that somehow works from there. So we're going to have some layers. It doesn't matter that the two are covering up. It doesn't matter that I'm going over the top because that can be sorted from there. And I've also got my fan heater on, and Sarah, I've had to resort to having my Oodie on this evening. It's just too cold in here for anything other than being properly covered at the moment. So let's just cover this. Then we can give it a blast, and we've got a layer that needs to go on, that needs to dry, so we can then tackle the next steps along the way. There we are. Well, I obviously put out far more than I needed, so let's just pop that over there, out of harm's way, rather than trying to dry big, thick areas. And then we can use that later on, she says. There we are. So blue and green, not very tree-like, but hey ho, all will become clear. I promise. There we are. Let's get rid of most of the excess of that. Right, so let's just pop that there and give this a wee blast. If I apple cranberry, because yeah, see, I like the sound of the filling. I like cranberry, I like apple, and I'm quite not opposed to having custard with an apple pie. So either, because it just seems to me to be highly sensible, or a nice combination. But hey ho, you can't have everything in this world. I'm going to get this everywhere, and I can see that we're going to have a pickle tonight. We've got all sorts. Let's just move some of this away, and in a minute I will be able to pop this out of the way. So my plans for next week might all go a little bit pear-shaped, because my husband is having heart surgery next Thursday. I don't know if it's going to be in the morning or in the afternoon. I only know that the day before. So I have sent a message to Pentacolor to see if that's what we can do and sort out in terms of when I may or may not go live next week. Just watch my social media pages. That's my name, Gill Humphrey, and Pentacolor's page, and all will be revealed on there, depending on what the decisions are about whether what's achievable and what's not achievable. Good evening, Sandawn. Welcome, my darling. I hope you can understand what we are doing. At the moment, I just have a wooden charcuterie board from one of the relatively cheap UK shop that I cleaned with some rubbing alcohol so that the surface oil was removed from it, and then I have added some matte acrylic paints to the sections that would normally have your meats and salamis and your cheeses in on your table. I quite often will have a hunt around for a wooden shaped base. I think they are great for working on. I just need this to be dry before I can have my next layers. With a crackle that you don't see me using very often. So I do like the gherkin salad, but I'm not eating fries. Thank you, my darling. I am now down 4.5 stone since March. So I am still behaving. I've got my cheekbones back. I've also gone from a very, very big 18-20 to a 12-14. So I can do a happy dance. I've still got a bit to go then. So let's just get this dry before we add another layer. It's not quite there. Nearly there. It doesn't matter that it looks a bit patchy. I could add another layer of paint over the top. It might have been less patchy if I had bothered to use the gesso underneath it, but that's cool because of what's going on and the layering. So I'm not going to either worry about it, because life's too short for doing that, isn't it? So for those of you that like Stamperia, Pentacolor have the new Stamperia collection in-house, available for ordering, as will many of the companies that they supply, which is also always very good. So This is a crackle medium that, as I say, you don't see me using very often. Let me just turn that around because that makes sense. So this is the classic crackle medium, and it's quite a different crackle to the cracking paste and the paints and the one component crackle. It's a two-part crackle, and it is entirely water based, so that makes it easy for cleanup, and you can use your water based varnishes, and you don't need to have a smelly solvent based varnisher. I love the fine line crackle, but sometimes you just need something that's not quite. Let's find a suitable sized brush. We've got lots of brushes here. That one will work. So I am going to pop the one component crackle. So this is the part one. I could have the universal primer out, but it's typically sold in two parts. So I'm just going to put a layer of that one component crackle, the first component onto here with a wet dirty brush. Now I wouldn't dream of doing that with the fine line crackle, okay, but this is, as I say, an entirely different crackle, and it's very nicely well behaved. So let's just pop that onto there. We don't want thick globs anywhere. There we are. I'll just make sure we've covered around. That will work. Because we're going to add some extra layers onto here, because why not? There we are. I thought I'd got those clean. Clearly not. So there we are. I'll pop that onto there. And then we'll go to our resin pieces. And sorry, Julie, this is properly Christmas themed today. Whatever we do, it is now December. It is time for Christmas makes. There we are. But as I say, this is a crackle that you don't see me using very well. Thank you very much, Sheila. I hope so too. It's a relatively high risk procedure, but you know, it's needed, so we just have to go with the flow. And I'm sure that whatever happens will be what's meant to happen, because that's just, you know, that's just life, isn't it? No one knows what's around the corner. So I hope Imrine is good. So yeah, we've just got a wooden board, and then we've filled the spaces on the wooden board with some paint. And this is the classic crackle, and it comes as two components. It's water-based crackle, so easy to use, very well behaved, generally, and like all Pentacolor crackles, can be force dried, which is also always incredibly helpful. So there we are. So I'm going to put that on the floor next to my fan heater. So I apologize if you can hear a noise in the background, but that's what that is. And we're going to we'll carry on with the next steps. There we are. I'll pop that over there for the time being, and that can then go onto the floor in front of the fan heater, and there from there. So three wise men, some stars, some animals. Excellent. And then we didn't need these animals. So Siberia over the years have done a couple of nativity sets. They have done, the original one was one of the thin texture molds, and these are quite small, but really lightweight and great then therefore for cards and things. And then last year and the year before, they had one of the A4 molds. So these are deeper and obviously by comparison quite a lot bigger. And I've used that to my advantage for the animal. So sometimes it's good to have more than one size, but I haven't actually gessoed any of these, mind that. But yeah, we're gonna, because I just haven't had time in amongst the running around in life. So we're just going to get that wax, some gesso over this little lot. And we could have done with having some black gesso out. So let me just grab the black gesso. There's some of them. So there we are. We've got the black gesso. It's just as well everything is around me, isn't it? And if I'm getting black gesso out, that means I've got some metallic paints out, because that's just the way the cookie crumbles. So let's just grab a brush and get some gesso onto these. So these are the there are 3 wise men, Mary, Joseph, and you could keep these really simple just by painting them with a single, matte layer, a single layer of, colour or black, and then just adding wax. I'm not going to do that. I am going to set myself a challenge, because why wouldn't I set myself a challenge of picking out the different pieces? Yeah. Because it's me. So we're not going to have the uber complicated picking out of the pieces, like that is for certain. Ooh, she says. There we are. So these have been cast with rapid resin, the white version, but I'm still adding a layer of primer to it. I hope that your son is well following his surgery when he was a small child, Sheila. The results of children's cardiac surgery are now much better than they were. There we are. So that's a coat of that. It won't take us forever to get these done. But as I say, there's logic to all of my processes in terms of time and letting areas dry along the way, because that's just what needs to happen. Have I got a straw colour out answer? No, because that didn't occur to me that that I might need a straw colour. But we'll sort that out. We'll be able to find something or make something from one of the colours that's there. We are absolutely sure, because that's just life. I've got another dirty brush. Hey ho, that's just also life. There we are. So we've got a donkey. That's wholly appropriate, isn't it? Because Mary came to her stable on a donkey, so that's good. We've got a sheep, we've got another sheep, and we've got an oxen. So that sort of, I think, works reasonably well. And I say I've mixed these between the different Mary, Joseph, 3 wise men, and some animals. Hey, that's always good. Good. Let's just tuck that. Oh, that's the top of my wet wipes box. Really helpful. So there you are. Yeah, let's just do that, and let's just grab those in the black, and then we'll get that dryer out, because why not? So Pentart have lots of primers. The primer paste, is the only one that comes in black. The rest are either clear or white. Sorry, I do apologise, because there is a black gesso in the Artisma, the new range. So if you want it to be a bit thinner than the primer paste is, then the Artemisa range that was relaunched a few weeks ago has a beautiful black gesso in it. Yeah, so that can go there, that can go there, and then I'll have black everywhere, won't I? Because that's guaranteed. I'm going to have black everywhere once I've had black on my hands. There we are. I can go out there. Let's just grab that and clean the black off my hands and give these a good chance to dry whilst I'm cleaning my hands and my tea is nearly ready for the second part that's going on that. And then we'll pick up some different colours off the floor to do these in stages, if that's what's going to be needed. So all the detail is as ever on all of the resin pieces, so that makes life a bit easier. Good evening, Connie. How are you today? I trust that you are well and your preparations for Christmas are going as you want them to. These all dried. And I can go from there. All adds to the fun of life, isn't it? There we are. We might be here a wee while this evening, ladies. I'm sorry to say, but that's okay. Well, I'm not sorry to say, because there's no point in having a project that you don't like at the end of the day because you've compromised. I think I'm better off making a project that I can be really happy with, even if that takes me a little bit of time. You're getting that? You are getting that. I know I don't need those two big ones. So 1, 2, let's put the 3 wise men together. Let's put Mary and Joseph together. Let's put the animals over there, baby Jesus, and then let's tuck that black out of the way. Let's give that a little white down. So, are we dry enough? We're nearly dry on here, which is got an area tucked in that corner that is still white. Let me just give this a little bit of gloss dry. So Connie, this is just a wooden charcuterie board that I've added some paint to the ones I've seen, and then I have put the classic crackle component one on. It goes on white and dries clear. I could have used the universal primer, that would also have worked. I'm just going to get this dry without bubbling it, or reasonably dry. I can see tips in that corner, there's just a white blob. But as that's going to be covered ultimately, I'm not going to stress to, because I know where I'm putting my extra pieces. So this is the component 2, and I think you can hear it's really quite liquid compared to component 1. It too is white or semi-white and will dry clear when it's dry. So let's just pop a little bit of that into there, a little bit of that into there, a little bit of that into there, and then let's just brush this out, cover the area, spread it around. You don't need masses of it. This is a it will vary, your thickness will vary depending on how much of this you've put on. So I will move some of this around because I don't want a thick layer. Also, the thicker the layer, the more it's going to take to dry, obviously. So let's just take some of that out, pop it onto here. There we are. Probably got way more than I need, but hey ho. We'll move it around as we go. And this is going to give us a random crackle effect. Could argue that you didn't need a crackle effect on these areas, but I just thought I would get out a product that and use a product that, as I say, you don't see me use very often. And sometimes that's the right thing to do, isn't it? There we are. You can see where it's soaking in, but that's also fine. So let's just move this around, and I'll do a little bit of clean up and take some of the excess off, because I've definitely poured more in here than I really needed, but that's okay. I'm going to swap to a bigger brush because it's just going to make my life so much easier if I do that. There we are. And it's going to get rid of the layers and the thickness, so I have a smoother coat. There we are. It's a nice big soft brush. Right, let's just get rid of some of that because we've clearly got more on there than we need. There we are. And then that can go and sit on the floor in front of the fan heater to dry. Hi Juliana, welcome my darling, welcome, welcome. Let's just take that off there, take that off the edges where I don't want it, and we'll pop that on the floor and lid that component 2. So this is the component 2 of the classic crackle, and then we can pop that out the way. So that will work. That will work for straw. That will work for that. And let's just grab some compact powder. I've got lots of colours on the floor, ladies, so don't be. Just want a nice small paintbrush that's not too raggedy. That'd be a joy, wouldn't it? Because we all know how I take care of my brushes. Not. That one will work. So let us just add. So this is my favourite go-to skin colour. In the Artemisa range, there is a paint called Flesh, I think, or Skin Tone. But in the acrylic, creamy acrylics and the matte acrylic range, then compact powder, which is this one, is the nearest to skin colour. So let's think, we've got some human beings here. They definitely need to have some skin, don't they? Well, it would help. There we are. So let's just take that. So this is Mary. Now we can pop that in. Give her face. I might paint the eyes in the detail post live, but that's okay with a pen. Her feet are covered, which is very convenient. So let's just pop our hands in. Hands are three-dimensional structures, aren't they? There we are. So that's her hands. There is Joseph. So he also needs to have a head that is, or a face that is skin coloured, but he actually has a beard. So let's just pick out his lips and we'll leave the beard. And then he has a hand here holding something, not too sure what, and a neck. So we'll pop that into the neck. There we are. And then we've got a hand here holding the staff. So that can go around there. And by turning your piece around, then you'll be able to see what you've got and what you haven't. And then we've got some toes poking through his sandals. There, so there we are. Just tidy that up. Okay. So, wise man here has definitely got a hairy beard on top of his turban. Let's just pop that into there. We've got no neck showing there, but we've got an awkward shape hand. That might prove a little bit of a challenge coming through there, where he's cupping his treasure. It doesn't matter that we've gone a little bit over that. And then we've got a hand coming around his staff from walking, so that's okay. We'll just paint that in. Right. There's nothing like setting yourself a challenge on a live, is it? But by having lots of fancy painting. But then you've never known me to take the easy way out. Those feet can have something a little bit more footwear appropriate than that. Right. Right, so we've got a bit of a beard, and then we've got a bit of a face, and then we've got hands coming up to the face. That's okay. And an arm there. That will work. And of course you can go back over these as and when you want. There we are. That can go there. Let's just pop that onto there. And we've got toes. We have got toes, ladies, here. And a little band holding that shoe on. So there we are. And the other leg's not there. So let's pick up baby Jesus, because he's clearly naked apart from his hair. So let's just give the baby some colour. I have to say, I think that these are easier to paint from the bigger mould than they are from the small mould. They're more comfortable sizes for my painting ability. There we are. And then we've got a white cloth there. So let's just pop that foot into there. And as ever, of course, we've got more paint than we need, but hey ho. such is the way of the world. We leave it there for tidying up with. Okay. Okay. So let's just take country blue. Let's just take this and we'll do some of the bits of Mary's clothes in that paler blue. That's inside, that's an inside. Let's just do this part as inside, and then we're going to take darker blue. And this one is a vintage blue. So let's just take that. So let's just take her veil. And then we'll pop, oh dear, she says, so just putting a great big splodge of that on her hand. Well, we knew that we were going to need to do a little bit touch up, so that's okay. There we are. So we'll just say there's nothing like making life difficult for yourself by deciding that you're going to paint all of the garments and all of the details in completely separately, because why not? Oh, because there we are. Good evening, Blanche. Welcome, my darling. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Your support is, as ever, always appreciated. There we are. Going to end up with sticky, mucky fingers in a minute, aren't I? Of course I am, because it wouldn't be me if I didn't. There is some hair to paint in, so, but we're going to let this paint dry before we paint the hair in. It's going to be easier. There we are. So, and then we can add there we are. And actually, let's change my mind, because I can. Let's just paint the headpiece in a different colour. Why not? We'll mix those two colours in together, so it's so that there is a difference. There we are. And then we'll come back and we'll pick up the hair. Later. So that's Mary. Let's just put that over there. We might well need to do some touching up, but that's okay. I'm going to deliberately let the skin of baby Jesus dry a bit more before I tackle the next bit of it. So let me see. We have Bourdon. We have pine green. We have turquoise. And we have brown, because we don't need 55,000 different pieces. So let us, I've no idea what colour order we want, and I guess this is all completely up to it. So let's take this king with his very opulent robes and use the Bourdon, which is a nice rich colour. There we are. So we've left a bit of an arm, which we haven't done skin coloured. So we'll tackle that in a minute. I knew there was a reason why I'd left all of that paint out. There we are. Let that dry. Before we tackle that. There we are. If we're getting fed up, ladies, I can show you how I'm intending popping it together and then paint all of these pieces off the live. The choice is, of course, yours. Or you can feel free to leave and come back and see the finished piece, because we are going to be here just a little bit of time, but that's okay. Sometimes you just have to do it, don't you? Yeah, we can tackle that. So that's got that one into there. Let's just clean that off and let's go with the turquoise. There we are, beautiful turquoise. So let's just take this gown. We're not going to go for it very complicated because life's too short. Honestly, it is. There we are. I have seen these molds really beautifully painted with in much more detail than I'm doing, but it's really your choice, I think, when it comes to painting molds as to how much detail you do or don't want, and how much time you want to spend, because otherwise it becomes very labour intensive. So he's got a turban on his head. So we might just keep that part of that the same. It's just going to be easier. But he has got an undercoat on there. Right. Got an undercoat? I think we do have an undercoat. So I'm going to tackle that by adding some of that pale green, the country green, into some of this to custom colour to get my undercoat. But before I do that, I'm going to take this and add the turban in that colour coordinated colour. And then there we are. So we've got a turban on his head. So let me just take some of that with the country green, and then let's mix a custom colour. And because it's got the darker green, the turquoise in it, then that will work quite nicely as an undergarment, I think. To there. There we are. Without needing to have even more colours out on the desk. There we are. That will work. Okay, cool. That will do for that for the moment. So we have one in that, one in red, one in green, and we have a magenta. So So we're going to use the same sort of tricks with this, I think, because why not? Because it's working. Hi Max, Marika, welcome my darling. Good evening Isabel. Don't you worry, I will recap where we're up to with the base piece when we get back to it, so that we're not having to spend silly amounts of time. Right, I just now need to work out what we've got where. So there we are. So because the wise men could be in any colours, couldn't we? Because I'm sure we don't know what they were in reality. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because we really don't know, do we? So yeah. Yeah. Oh, don't want to do that. So let's just take some of this. We'll be putting the detail back in ultimately anyway, because that's just the way, this is just the way I I generally work, isn't it? So let's just take some of that skin colour, because it's, there we are. Okay, and we can now pop in a different colour into that arm, and we'll pop a different colour into there, and a different colour, yeah, that softer colour into there. And I can come back and retouch up what I want to. Let's just pop that into there. And I think this should be the inside that's showing from that leg. I might be wrong, but I think it should be. There we are. Okay. Let's just tidy that up a little bit. And then let's just take our head covering and pop that in to there. All right. So, yeah. Okay. So I do feel that Joseph would not be in an opulent colour. But before I do that, let me just grab this and we'll do some bits for the other wise man. And then we'll come back to some of these other pieces. Let me just pick up some of that. Of course, I can always pick up some more of that if I want to tidy up the faces. So let's just pop this into here. And then let's just come across onto here. Oh, that looks like I might need to get that proper border back out because we've missed an area, but that's okay. And that's what happens with this style of painting, is you come back and forth and you see different bits at different times. And I can definitely see a bit of an arm that I want to cover in the compact powder. So that's okay. So let's just pop this into here. We're not going to say all of these areas that are different on the piece could all be picked out in separate colours if we wanted to. Let's just clean that off, and let's re-pick up these hands where they're mucky. So let's pick up a little bit of that, and then let's just pop that into there and redo that arm that we missed entirely because we were daft. There we are. That face is okay. That's okay. We're going to have those covered. Let's just she doesn't need a dirty face, does she? No, of course not. Of course Mary doesn't need a dirty face. And they're okay. And so is he. Cool. Let's come back to that red, because I can see an area here that definitely needs to be in that. It's the other arm. So let's just pop that into there. There. Okay. So we have our nativity coming together. Let's just pop that there. And as you can see, you end up with a lot of pots of paint lurking on the surfaces. But it doesn't really matter, does it? It's the joy of having what we want. So let me just pick. I'm going to go with this vintage brown for Joseph. Let's shove a bit of that there. There we are. So he can have essentially be plain, because they weren't very well off, so they wouldn't have had very opulent clothing. Well, that's my excuse, and I'm going to stick to it, because why not? So these are all water-based acrylics, which makes them very easy for when they get thick over time, because all acrylics will get thick over time. You can thin them down, or you could use the new Artemisa acrylic binder to thin them down. That would work quite nicely as well, but might just give them a slightly more glossy feel than I'm looking for. But none of it. Oh, there's another foot down there I've managed to miss. Oh, really? Okie dokie. We'll sort that out. We'll put some more toes in a minute. There we are. Hey. I don't know what he's carrying there. I'm just going to paint it all in the brown. Well, in that vintage brown, which is a nice soft muted colour, muted colour. It's appropriate colour palette, I think. All right. There we are. Let's avoid his beard. Okay, so we are making progress, I think. Well, possibly, maybe. Yeah, of course we are. Right, so let's just tack in the rest of that. That's more of that. Excellent. Right, that can tuck there, that can go into there, that can go there. Excellent. Let us go for a darker brown. So whilst we've got that out, we've got a donkey, we've got an oxen, and we've got some sheep. Well, the sheep are obviously going to have to be white, aren't they? So let's go for this muted browny grey here as for the donkey, and we'll put the donkey in while some of the rest of it is drying. And we'll sort out the black bits and the shoes of the people and the hay. And we obviously need the blanket of Mary colouring in as well. Let's just pop that into there. We'll sort that hoof out shortly. There we are. Can do these in layers as we go. There we are. Yeah, I'll put that into there. So let us just have a nice red blanket, that bourdon colour, which is my favourite. I have to say, it is my favourite red. I'm not a lipsticky red person. The carbine's nice, but I do like this. And I also like red wine, but this one is on the surface and already out, so that seems to me to be the logical one to use. Here we are. And as I look, the more bits I can see that I've missed, because that's what happens, isn't it? There we are. So we'll just tuck that into there, tuck that into there. I have. Where are you? There you are, you little monkey. We have vintage grey. So let's just do our oxen in a dirtied up vintage grey colour. That one is going to be a challenge, but hey ho, we'll not worry about it. We'll not worry about all the details. It's a suspicion of a tail sitting down there. This is from the small mould, because the one in the large mould is just too big for the space that I have. I'll cover that over and then I can fill it in. They can stay with the white gesso, and I might add some colour. Well, I will add some colour in. There we are. So those are our creatures, reasonably well covered. I don't want the grey. Oh, she says. Let me just clean that lid better than that, and then I can get rid of that. Pop that onto there. Pop that on. Go on. Just be nice. Because why would it be nice? And let's just take the chocolate or the light brown. And then once these have got base layer, the paint layer on, I promise you, give this mess an almighty clean up. So let's just pop these out of the way. So we've got some staffs that need covering. So let's just take that brown. We should have, I think, done a bit more cloak there. So in a minute we'll sort that out. Cloak coming underneath. And the heavens have opened, ladies, I'm afraid. Hence the noise. he doesn't have hair, he's got a beard, so that's, I'm going to ignore the beard from there, but I am going to pick up some of this pre-mixed colour here and tuck in the rest of that outfit that I have ignored. There we are. So we've got that sorted. And then I need to think about what colour I'm going to do that casket. And I'm just going to take some of that dark blue. That's nearly run out. So this one, that blue is literally called dark blue, which is always positive, isn't it? Or I think when the colour matches what you think. The indigo would be my favourite blue, but it's a lot darker. So let's just paint our gift in. There we are. So we have a gift there. Do I want? I thought I had out a black paint, but really I've got black primer paste out, so that's what we'll grab. It will work. It will work. Let's just have a little bit of tidying up. So we need some of that for underneath there. There we are. And let's just pick up a bit of the black, which I'm going to use as black paint for the shoes for this man, because he's got shoes. He doesn't have a staff to paint. And I'll come back to that in a minute. So he's now got some shoes. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. She says, let's just paint underneath him. There we are. Right, let's pick up this one. So he needs a staff. His wooden staff for walking, or his walking stick, or whatever you want. I'm going to paint in there. I know that, so it looks, because it's not really part of the costume, and I've just put my hand in wet paint on the outfit, which is not quite what was intended, but hey ho. And he can have a white beard. So that saves me having to repaint that. Excellent. And I will paint those in. So those are okay. That's okay. So let's just think about what we're going to do here. I'm going to paint his shoe in the brown. And his gift is there. So I'm going to take some of my turquoise to paint that gift, because I think that was going to work really quite nicely onto there. So let's paint this the gift in that turquoise. And these colours are all going to then work together, aren't they? And then we'll there we are. Okay. Lid back on that one. And then let me think. Now I think there has to be another shoe lurking somewhere underneath here. So let me just paint that shoe back in. Where's the light brown? There we go. That's almost gone. We'll tackle the bottom of here with that. There we are. So that's done, that's done, that's done. He needs some gold for his crown. Mary is done. Let's take this for Joseph and paint in the staff. Here we are. And the shoe. And his hair. And then we'll find a different colour for Mary's hair. That could be that, that could be that, that could be that. That will do. Right. So we have metallic antique gold, which we're just going to pop onto the stars, which is why I painted these with the black gesso. Life is too short to pick out the crown on the wise man in black gesso, but you could do if you wanted. As I say, I normally always cover my, if I'm using metallic, have black underneath it. Put those areas, and then we can pick up and pop the black on there. And we have nearly finished painting these pieces. She says, famous last words, ladies. Thank you. Good evening, Lynn. Welcome, my darling. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. So let's just give him a pot of gold. And a nice gold crown. Do need to think about what colour hair he needs, along with, because we've missed his hair. The beards are easy, and we need a colour, a nice colour for Mary as well. I know this is going to seem really strange, because I've now picked up the vintage yellow, and no, I'm not going to do the hair all in that, but we're going to pop some of that there, pick up some of this brown, and we're going to create ourselves a custom colour, because I think that will work. So let's just paint this hair a mustardy colour. I'll sort out the details onto here in a minute, because I've just then splodged that where I didn't really want it, but hey ho, it won't matter in the grand scheme of things. It's just, you know, when it's you painting at home, just take your time and paint more slowly. So I've gone and got that green where I don't want it, but that's easy. Yeah, sort of that green, not the greeny brown. So let's just repaint over those, fill in that bit. That's fine. I don't want her to have red hair. Hi, Debbie. Thank you. And let's just pop some of this colour, this custom colour, into Mary's hair. There we are. Okay. So let's now have some dirty sand, which is why I've got that greeny colour out in the first place. What colour hair do we think our baby Jesus should have? Because we've missed that entirely. Bed of straw, so that's easy. Let's just do this bit. Wouldn't do if I forgot to colour baby Jesus's hair, would it? There we are. Let's just pop this up where you might be able to see rather than down by my hands. There we are. Did I take on a ridiculous project for doing on a live? Maybe, possibly, but hey ho. There we are. Because we haven't got my normal 2,500 pieces of resin, have we? No, we've just got enough. Enough to cause me to have to paint them all. There we are. So let's think about that hair colour. Let's just paint the hair in. I think. And I definitely need to put some more brown into some of the areas of newborns with a full head of hair. It's an interesting concept, isn't it? There we are. Right, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. They can stay there. Let's just take our donkey on his straw. Paint that in. We'll worry about the hooves later on. Right, let's just give some of this is going to get hidden ultimately because of the way I'm intending layering. Well, and then I clearly decided that I didn't need to paint any of the rest of that, so my bad. Let me just grab that grey, and then we're going to have a jolly good clean up because we has a mess. We know we has a mess. There we are. And when it's on the piece, I might well just add some extra bits. Let's just have a hoof there, and a little hoof there, and a little hoof there. And I think we've got one tucked back there. Yeah, there we are. Right, eeny, meeny, miny. Let's just get rid of some of this almighty mess that's lurking here, because we have so much stuff out on the desk. I cannot see the wood from the trees, and we're going to end up with an almighty pickle if we're not very careful. So we just chuck that over there, chuck that over there. We might need that out at some point. We'll pop that over there where we can find it, and then let's just tidy up this lot. What have I done with my scraper? Oh, well, we'll use a palette knife just to get rid of the mess, or the worst of the mess. And then we can wipe that up. It's better. Not perfect, so just bear with while I get rid of the muckiness of the whole piece and tuck some of this other stuff well out of the way. Right, let's just give these a blush dry, then a coat of varnish, and oh dear, and I will worry about tidying up some of these pieces ultimately if I need to. Look at the state of my hands. Is it any wonder I get stuff where I don't want it? Hardly. And the crackle is still crackling, so that's good. So I don't have any rice paper. In fact, I don't have a single piece of paper on this at all. I know. What madness is that, I hear you say? So I am going to grab a different colour of antiquing wax. So I've got antique brass, brown, gold. We'll leave those for a minute, excuse me, just because of my So obviously you can spend a lot longer painting as you wish to. You don't have to be as slap happy as I was to get it done in the time that we have available. We're going to be over an hour as it is, but that's okay. And whilst we're doing this, my classic crackle, because remember I've chosen to work with a crackle that you don't see me use very often, is sitting on its side happily crackling at the moment. I can see that it's has actually crackled. Let's get rid of some of this. There we are. So we're going to antique entirely with antique paste today. You often see me using other mediums, but we're going old school. Sometimes it's good to revisit the basics, isn't it? Rather than just always grabbing for the new products. There are 5 different colours of antique paste, and I've got 2, 3, 4 of them on the table, and the other one is silver, and silver's definitely not what I want for this colour palette today. There we are. Don't want to put a matte varnish on those stars, so I'm going to leave those, which is slightly risky, but it will have to do. I could go and find some shiny varnish, but there we are. It will all come together. Of course it will all come together. Of course it well. Let's just put those over there. Stop messing with them. Let these dry. And then we're going to need some assorted one more work. We'll need a clean clotted brush for the white though. Because otherwise we'll have a mucky mess. Nothing like waiting for paint to dry, is there? There really isn't. Umbra and white for those. So we're going to add some grass, I think, to some of that. Grass to that. Oh, yeah. We'll get there. This needs to be properly dry, otherwise I will make an awful mess when I grab the next bits. So I think those are just about there. And I can add face details post live because we're going to be here at silly o'clock if I don't. So let me find a brush that I will never be able to use to paint again because it will be. So antique pastes are wax based. So this is white. So I'm going to use this for my low lights. I treat this in exactly the same way as you would any antiquing product. Make sure you've got it all covered and then grab a cloth and wipe it back gently. There we are. It will just help us bring out all of the details in there and the colours. So let's just convert these sheep into something that looks a bit more sheep-like. That's better. That softens that. They're a bit dirty, but that's okay because they will have been, won't they? They'll have been in there. There we go. It just fills in. There's lots of details on this one. In the cat, on the oxen. There we are. So he's got, if I get rid of the shine, he's got lots of detail on him. Right. There we are. There is our Jesus in his things. Right, I can still see I've got so this is the Umbra. It's a bit thick. Right, Let me just grab. This is just white spirit, ladies. I'm just going to put a blob there. It'll help me spread this more easily than otherwise. There we are. That's better. There we are. Let's just take our wise man. Cover him. The umbre you've seen me use frequently. There we are. Might need to get some more of that out, but hey, that's okay. And we can add wax to the highlights, so that's all equally okay. So we've got our waxes out. Oops, she says, throwing stuff all around. Yeah. And the importance whenever you're using an antiquing product is to get it over every bit of the surface. Otherwise, the bits that you miss stand out like a sore thumb when you wipe back, because you never get it all off. No matter how much you try, it's just not possible. But this is definitely a great leveler for speedy painting, for those of you that like the idea but don't have the time for. For doing mountains of it. So I'm going to leave the sheep that colour. Right, that needs to dry, that needs to dry. Let me just give that a blast. That's where she dropped. Oh, that's where we dropped it to. So they're sorted. That definitely needs a bit of a dry. Let's see where it is. When these are properly dried, I can then use a black pen and add stuff back in. But I will need to let the antique paste really dry before I can do that, because it won't go onto a wax surface, obviously, because that's just not going to happen. There we are. Right, meeny meeny, have I finished with that? Not at all. Not at all. Right, so components are all made. They will get a bit of tinkering with long term. So here is my classic crackle, and it was a thin layer, so I've got lots of thin colours. This is my gold antique paste. That I'm now going to brush into that crackle. And then I will wipe it back. We haven't finished painting. Well, we might have done for now. There we go. And then I'm going to grab the brass, which is a slightly different colour. Put that into here. And I can either add wax to the wood, or the colour I've got out is actually the red gold Lasur, metallic Lasur. So I'm like, well, from the wall decor collection, I can just scrub that lot into there. She's just going to add a little bit of interest to the background from everything. So let me just do that. Right, let's just wipe off the surface. So if I pop that up, I can see I've got lots of crackles onto there. And it's crackled reasonably well. I can see that it's not showing up. There we are. Brilliantly well on camera. It's tiny crackles in here, so you can see the difference between where you put thinner and thicker layers. It's just adding interest into the background. So let me just take off what I don't want on here, and then there's definitely an area there where it wasn't dry, because I can see where I've wiped the crackle off there, but we'll tackle that with a surreptitious bit of that and not wipe it back quite so much. There we are. Yeah, it's really difficult, I think, there for the crackle. There we are. Another area where I haven't quite had it dry, but that's fine. Wool colour, Lasur, red copper. Oh no, we really are mixing it up tonight. It's a beautiful colour, is this? It's going to allow the wood to shine through, so it will still be wood, but it's going to change the colour in line with, yeah, and just change that shade, so from it being quite so obviously brown wood to having a red tint. But you'll still be able to see all of the red detail through there. Don't want it underneath. And this is another water-based product, so it will wipe off easily. It's just, and off live I will paint the sides of it with the same colour, but you don't need me to see me doing that tonight. There we are. It's just changing that beautifully, and it'll add a little bit of shimmer to the outside of the frame in the process. You could leave it all entirely natural if that works better for you. I like the idea of changing it to reflect, yeah, to add that bit of red into it. There we are. So that can go there. That's waterproof, a water brush. That can be lidded. Right, ladies, let's put it all together. Oh, there it is. Let's just give that a blast. And then let me move this onto the one just a little bit so you can see what we're going to do. top, I think, is now dry. So let's just grab my heavy body gel mat and okay, so let's just pop a shooting star there, static scar there, and you could add as many of these as you want. And I might add a bit of splatter. Then what was I going to do? Right, so that's the top shell. Okie dokie. And then I'm going to pop my kings into here. So I need to fill a space a little bit. So I've got my, as usual, my canvas spacers. That wasn't the one I wanted at that point, but hey ho, we'll grab that, get there in a minute. So he is going to sit there. Get rid of that. Because they came from the east in the dark, and they saw the sky, the stars in the sky, didn't they? So hence, that's my logic, and I'm sticking to it. Thank you. Let's just pop one of those there. Pop that onto there. And then I can pop that wise man onto there. Okay, so right, now then. But I think some of these are going to need a bit of a haircut. Let me see, grab another pack of canvas spacers. Oh, you well-behaved piece. So one onto there. One onto there. Oh! One onto that. So there we are. We have Jesus sitting there, the baby. And we're going to tuck Mary there. And we're going to lift Joseph forward just a little bit. I'm conscious that I have 3 spaces under that one. So I am only going to pop 2 spaces onto Joseph, because then he's going to sit slightly forward but tucked underneath. And then we have Havix. So we're going to need to move that, just shuffle that over a little bit, I think. There we are. We have these all worked out. There we are, there we are, there we are. There we are. Like so. So you just have to then play with your placing. The joy of the gel mediums is that, of course, it stays mobile for you and gives you a bit of working time. So let's just pop that one there. Deliberately popping a big blob there. I'm very conscious I've got a gap underneath there. Let's just stick a big blob of that onto there. So we've got our vixen, our oxen, our things, and our donkey is going to go there. So let us just take a big pair of scissors that we're not going to cream cracker. Oh no, it's let's just pop that there. Let's take another one of those and chop it again. These are leather shears, incidentally, that I've got in my hand, and they will cut through most things. It doesn't really matter if it shatters a little bit. There we are. We'll pop that onto there. Piece there, piece there. Pop that there. Okie dokie. So we have our donkey and everything else. Let's just have a little bit of a tidy up there, because that will dry white if we're not careful. And then I've got some natural coloured moss to tuck in, because I hadn't got stuff that I felt otherwise like straw, so that can go into there, and then we can pop him back on there. And we can take a bit more of our straw, and we can lift him temporarily, put a bunch of that there, stick it underneath. And then he's actually sitting in the straw. Let's get rid of the excess that we've got there. We need some more tucked underneath, so I'm just going to move that up out of the way. You couldn't do this if you were using ordinary glue, because you couldn't easily, once they're down, aren't they, with ordinary glue? Yeah, so this is just going to allow me to pop this stuff in and around. There we are, because that's what I want to do. That's there. And then let's just pop another bit into there. So we've got our creatures are sitting there in their bed of straw rather than floating. And I could add some art stones if I wanted to. There we are. So that's the bottom. I might well sprinkle some art stones into there, but I'm going to let that dry first. And I might just, I'm going to pop some just to ground. Definitely want the colour of the moss, not the bright green. Let's just shuffle that underneath there. There we are. I think that will work. And we might pop just a little bit more along there. So I'm just grounding my pieces so into here, and I think I'm going to tuck another piece of that tuck down into there. There we are. So, ladies and gentlemen, if there are any gentlemen watching, here is our piece. I might well carry on and add some art stones before I photograph it, and I will add some splatters into the sky. But there we are. We have our nativity from the stars at the top, with the wise men looking at the stars, and Joseph, the baby, Mary, and the animals in in the stable at the bottom. So I hope you've enjoyed that, and I look forward to seeing you later at some point. Now, it might end up being Tuesday of next week, because I think it probably won't be Thursday, as I said earlier, but I will post what I'm doing on my social media pages. So take care, everyone. Look after yourselves. Remember to be kind and enjoy your life to the full. Bye.